This is the Fort Bend Herald Football Scoreboard Show with Joel Luna and Sam Cinta, bringing you this week's latest on the gridiron from around the Bend.
Week 3 already on the Fort Bend Herald Football Scoreboard Show. I'm Sam Cinta here with Joel Luna. Excited to dive into some big wins for Lamar, for Fulshear, for Needville, for Randle. I mean, heck, this was a pretty exciting week of ball around the area.
It was a bit better than last week. This week we were 4-3 as far as the record is concerned. So yeah, it gives us more wins and gives us more to talk about. So yeah, it's good to be over 500.
It's always good to have happier post-game interviews after a game with coaches and players than a week ago. But certainly what I think I know my answer here. But I'll start with you here, Joel. What jumped out at you for week 3? I mean, a couple surprising results, I think, and a couple really convincing wins as well.
Yeah, for the games that I watched, it had to be Fulshear and the way they put it on Fort Bend Austin. It's a Fort Bend Austin team that when you look across from the fields and see each other's roster, you see Fulshear all the way across, and then Austin, not as much. So they've got a small roster, kind of like Terry, kind of resembles that a little bit. But otherwise, just Fulshear, the way they just put it on. And from the start, first play, they score on a big play, and they don't stop. They don't stop until the end. And that's what they needed after 2 tough games with Pearland and Fort Bend Ridgepoint. They needed something like this. And of course, it helps the coach a lot because, you know what I'm saying? This is true, So, other than that, Lamar, the way they ran over Chavez, as well. I mean, with their shutout. At times, it looked a little iffy, but otherwise, it was good.
I could cheat and say, I'm really surprised by Needville beating Columbus. I think everybody in the state outside of that Needville locker room is probably surprised that they beat the Cardinals. But I think on the other side of it, the most surprising thing I saw this week was that George Ranch Humble game. This is a George Ranch offense that had no problem going up and down the field. They get a win against Clear Falls last week against a really good Knights offense, but they still scored a whole bunch of points. They scored a bunch of points against Westside in week 1 and saw a team that for 3.5 quarters couldn't move the ball, couldn't get out of their own way, penalties, fumbles, you name it, muffed kickoffs, just a really tough day for the Horns. Hayden Drinkard ended up having a little bit of a bigger day than probably would have if not for a 72-yard touchdown run there in the fourth quarter. Trevor Bielitz caught a score as well, but really thought the Horns against an Humble team that had given up a lot of points would have a little bit of an easier time putting points on the board than the 14 that they got. But an opportunity for George Ranch to turn the page next week against the Bryan Vikings. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but first, I wanted to talk about the Lamar Consolidated Mustangs and that big win to move to 2-1 against the Chavez Lobos.
Playing the final non-district gamer on Thursday night at Coward Stadium seemed kind of weird because of how fast time flies. Yes, it is the third week of Texas high school football, and the Lamar Consolidated Mustangs, they had to amp things up because District 9-5A Division II opens later this week. The Mustangs rolled at Houston Chavez 44-0, which gave the Stangs a 3-0 record against Chavez dating back to 2012. When they played the first one, 56-14, they've outscored the Lobos 149-30 in those 3 matchups. Now, Lamar came out with a lot of enthusiasm in the first few minutes of the first period against the Lobos. The Mustang offense gave the LC crowd something to cheer on quickly when quarterback Edgar Garcia connected with Cameron Deliad with a 44-yard touchdown. Garcia then got his legs churning on that second drive as he got an important third down by placing the ball at the Lobos' 16-yard line. A 10-yard penalty moved the ball 10 yards up to the 6-yard line where sophomore tailback Larry Clinton pushed some defenders aside on his way for a 6-yard score. In less than 6 minutes, with the Mustangs already up 2 scores and looking for more, but something happened to them which looked troubling because all these players have to do is think about getting better in every aspect of the game. Instead, they went into somewhat of a drought. until the final drive before halftime. It was a 15-play drive, which made it 21-0, and Clinton scoring again from 10 yards out. After a conversation at halftime with the coaches, the Mustangs did look crisper in some of the things they were doing in the second half. Clinton scored his third touchdown by reversing the field on the Lobos, scoring from 17 yards out, and they're up 28-0. Now the Mustang defense had another good effort, this time blocking a punt which recorded a safety, 30-0. With the night still not over, Clinton had one more score in him, recording that from a 10-yard scamper into the end zone. It had been some time since the Mustangs had shut anybody out. In fact, you have to go back to 2018 when that happened. In that year, they scored not only one shutout, but twice. They shut out Brazowood 27-0 and Cleveland 59-0. In the meantime, between now and then, they had been shut out 5 times. So the Mustangs are looking pretty good. Hopefully they'll continue that, but they still have to go through the gauntlet of district play now.
In need of a partner to help you reach your financial goals? Houston Federal Credit Union is your local credit union. With checking accounts, savings accounts, auto loans, mortgage loans, business loans, and credit cards, Houston Federal Credit Union can help you achieve all of your financial dreams. Find out more information at houstonfcu.org to apply online for a loan or membership, and find out more information about how they can help you get where you want to go. Week 3 action for me started Thursday night at Traylor Stadium as the Terry Rangers hosted their homecoming game against Fort Bend Willow Ridge, and the Eagles, right from the jump, impressive offensively, kept Terry off balance offensively, and at the end of the day, it was a 30-15 win for those Eagles. And really leading Willow Ridge was quarterback Donovan Isles, who had 346 yards from scrimmage. He had 119 yards and a touchdown, 19 carries, rushing the ball, went 16 of 18 through the air for 228 yards and a score. It's a big win for Willow Ridge, their first of the season after losses to Lamar Consolidated and Friendswood. And unfortunately for Terry, of course, their second straight loss after dropping a contest to Houston Westbury a week ago. And you talk with Coach Jackson, Darnell Jackson of the Terry Rangers, after that game, and he said, look, they were very good. As you know, they were playing that triple option style offense. They've got to be sound defensively, and they just weren't. It's interesting when you're in the press box at Traylor Stadium and you are sitting right next to the home coach's box, right? You are sitting, there's just a window separating you from the coaches, in this case, Terry coaches and coordinators that were up from the press box. And during the first drive of the game, you could hear Terry defensive coaches, as Isles is marching them down the field, kind of saying, this is gonna be a long day. And it was, in that respect, of course, when you have 340 some odd yards from your opposing quarterback, that's a tough day. Great performance by the Eagles, but the Rangers know, now that the schedule becomes real with the start of 9-5A play this week, they're going to have to fix some things real quickly to get back on track if they are going to test for that 4 seed in the playoffs, which has been the Rangers' goal all season long.
The biggest thing right now is new season. You know what I'm saying? It's preseason. Started off 1-2, but it's a new season. I mean, this didn't really matter, maybe for morale, but as far as a new season and start trying to make the playoffs, next week is where it really matters. So I'm looking forward to a full week. No more Thursday games for a while. So, hopefully that extra day will give us some time to heal up and rest, get some guys back on offense and defense. So.
And of course, for the Rangers, wasn't a all bad, right? Caden Jones, quarterback, 77 yards, throwing the ball. Brandon Jefferson at 85 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Mann, 12 carries, 35 yards and a score. They did make it a one-score game at one point. It was an 8-point game at one point there in the second half before Willow Ridge got a 15-yard touchdown run just in front of that 2-minute warning to close out the win. So unfortunately, a 1-2 start to the season for the Rangers. They will open play next week on the road. They go to Stingery Stadium to face Texas City, with Willow Ridge hosting Brookshire Royal Saturday for Week 4 action. In other Thursday action, Fort Bend Elkins beat Alief Hastings 28-13, while Ridge Point moves to 3-0 in a dominant start to the season, 31-3 over Bridgeland. El Campo makes the march into Fort Bend Dulles and beats the Vikings 58-0, while Kempner blanks Houston Wisdom 38-9. Up the road in Katy, Maid Creek beats Katy Taylor 55-27, while Katy Freeman defeats Katy Harmony 69-0.
It was a fun evening at Mercer Stadium on Friday night with the Fulshear Chargers finally on the third game of the season, showing what they could turn into when everything is working. The celebration afterwards with a game ball presented to head coach Stephen Hill, along with a Gatorade bat by some of his players, was even more jubilant. Fulshear's 67-0 shutout of Fort Bend Austin was the team's third highest scoring game since they started playing varsity. The highest scoring games have been a 77-18 blowout of Fort Bend Clements, along with a 74-41 shootout against Strake Jesuit. As for Friday's successful triumph against the Bulldogs, it was a record-breaking contest with a senior quarterback, Sean Patel, throwing for 7 touchdowns, which was a school record. But the transfer also finished with 358 passing yards with no interceptions and was 16 of 22 attempts, throwing 4 of those touchdowns in the first quarter alone. Needless to say that the Chargers started the season up against a Pearland Oilers squad that was loaded with talent, and they showed it with a 52-28 victory, followed by a 34-10 win for Fort Bend Ridge Point in the second game of the season. Through all of that, Fulshear was still working on new offensive and defensive schemes, along with integrating a bunch of new Chargers in new positions. Even against the Bulldogs, the Chargers were still looking for ways to be successful under Hill's ideals of being successful on a football field. Though this victory answered many questions for the Charger coaching staff and players, the improvement will continue with still one more non-district game this coming Friday. The Charger defense allowed just 203 yards of offense against Fort Bend Austin and had 3 interceptions in the win. Celebrate they can, but District 26A is around the corner, and they have to continue doing exactly what they've been doing to get better. As Hill mentioned after the game, when all 3 phases are working in unison, then there is a probability that the Chargers could be on course to a victory. But the only way to find that out is to play the entire 48 minutes with a hunger of getting a win together. Fulshear will be at Wildcat Stadium this Friday night in Temple to take on Burleson Centennial in the final non-district matchup. But then, here comes Alief Taylor.
Looking to make your next real estate move but unsure where to start? The Ace Hernandez team at Manor Lane Southwest has you covered. The Ace Hernandez team is Fort Bend and Southwest Houston's real estate experts with 75 years of experience in guiding homeowners and home buyers alike. Contact the Ace Hernandez team at 281-762-6757 and find out more about their seller financing options today.
Terry Willow Ridge was not the only homecoming action this week, as down Highway 36 in Needville, the Blue Jays hosted the number 1 team in 3A D1, the reigning state champion Columbus Cardinals, for their homecoming game. And I'll tell you what, I think the Jays were able to turn the page from a tough loss last week against Livingston. They trailed at halftime against the Cardinals, but strong play defensively, winning the turnover battle, winning the penalty yards battle. Boy, all of that added up to one stunning Needville Blue Jay win, a 17-13 victory against the champs from Columbus. Boy, oh boy, what a performance from Caden Jakubic. 2 interceptions, including the game winner on the final drive, picking off Jack Scoble, one of the best quarterbacks in the lower divisions in the state of Texas. An absolutely gigantic win for Needville. I mean, I don't know what you can say. Ralphie Ortiz recovered a fumble in this game. Jesus Miranda kicked a field goal to give them a lead. They got a touchdown run from Kobe Campbell. Just Santiago Gonzalez had a fumble recovery. It was an incredible performance. It was an incredible win, an eye-opening win, a truly, truly shocking result. And I'm not trying to knock Needville at all. It's a good team. They were ranked coming into the year. Yeah, we had some questions about what they look like up front and maybe how the passing game would continue to evolve. But, man, starting was a brutal 3-week stretch with ranked teams in Columbus, El Campo, and Sealy. And I think a lot of people kind of expected the Blue Jays to maybe drop this game and need to get a get-right win against El Campo ahead of the continuation of that series with Sealy. But how about that? The Blue Jays are 2-1, and they just beat number 1. A great win for Mike Giles, a great win for the Blue Jays. They will take every bit of that. Kobe Campbell had 47 yards, his 2 scores. Cameron Hall, 54 yards on the ground, 62 yards through the air. Ralphie Ortiz caught 4 passes, 43 yards. Yeah, a great win for Needville. Of course, it's all non-district, so right now the size of the win may seem anecdotal, but on a confidence-building level, you go on the field and you turn the page on a loss by beating a team like Columbus, and I'm going to tell you what, mentality-wise alone, your group is going to walk out on the field against anybody the rest of the way and think, we can do this. And that's going to be really big, especially the next 2 weeks. Like I said, you go to Ricebird Stadium in El Campo, you're taking on a very good Ricebird team, and then you return home and you host a Sealy team that has been beating you for decades. And then you start district play, and you've got tough teams like Stafford and Fort Bend Crawford that you've got to contend with. Big win to get back in the win column for the Blue Jays, to get confidence back, to prove to themselves and to everybody around here that the preseason rankings around Needville were also no joke. It's junior-led backfield. They've got good size up front. The secondary has played well in terms of getting interceptions the last few weeks. So a lot to like about the Jays moving forward, but even more to like about what Needville did here in beating the Columbus Cardinals that already had a loss to the Cuero Gobblers earlier this season. So now the preseason number 1 and 3A D2 sitting at 1-2 through the first 3 weeks of the season. So again, really happy for Coach Giles, his staff, and his players down there at Needville, and could be the sign that these Jays are going to turn it on in a big way as we turn into the district slate. Friday night for me was taking in the Randle Lions against Fort Bend Travis at Traylor Stadium, and the third contest of the year for the Lions, a game that they won a season ago, 64-7, and a couple of things jump out to me in this 56-29 win over the Tigers. The first one, of course, is the score. You will take that win, right? Like, you will take a 27-point win over anybody. You win by 4 scores. That's a dominant performance. But if you have followed along with what the Randle Lions have accomplished the last couple of years as closely as we have followed along with it, you'll know that this is the first time aside from the state championship game last year, where Randle had allowed more than 14 points in a game since the 2023 season. It was the most points allowed in a regular season game since the end of the year against Huntsville in 2023, and the most they had allowed in a non-district game since playing Bryan in September of that season. So 29 points was a lot of points for this Randle team to allow comparative to what they've been doing the last couple of years. The other thing that I noticed, and this is something I thought about in the press box, and I was curious how Brian Randle was going to feel about this after the game, but mistakes, unforced errors. I mean, it's one thing to throw an interception or to lose a fumble or something like that, have a holding call wipe away a touchdown. One-off things here and there are going to happen throughout the course of the year, even to the best teams in football. But procedural penalties and misplays on special teams and targeting calls and taunting calls and mistake after uncharacteristic mistake that we never see the Randle Lions make, well, they made them. And it just didn't feel like the same level of attention to detail that we have gotten used to from the Lions during this run of extended excellence that they've had the last couple of seasons. I'm certainly not trying to raise alarm bells. They won the game 56-29 over a 6A team that very likely makes the playoffs this year. It's a really, really good Fort Bend Travis team. Several players are going to go Division I from this roster. Davis Kinney's a Northwestern committed safety. They've got Josiah Vilmael who's going to Oklahoma State, also in the secondary. Like, they've got dudes on that roster. And the Lions beat them. And that's a good sign overall for what this team is trying to do, that they can beat another really good team on the field and beat them convincingly. But in talking to Brian Randle after the game, he'll be the first one to tell you there's a lot of things to fix. We talked about this last week, that this game against the Tigers represented the start of the most important 3-game stretch on the Lions' schedule this year. They had the Tigers at Traylor Stadium. They go to Hall Stadium this week, Thursday night, to take on Fort Bend Marshall, who was the preseason number 7 team in the state in 5A D2. And then following that, they return home to Traylor Stadium and they host Iowa Colony, who is the preseason number 5 team, who they beat 30-10 in the regular season last year. They beat them 21-14 in overtime at NRG Stadium in the regional final. And they are, by all assumptions, the key challenger to the Lions' supremacy in this district and perhaps even across Region 3. Yeah, Brenham's good. And that is a bridge to cross, sometime in November. Should we get to there, maybe even December. But right now, the Lions are focused on the Marshall Buffs and the Iowa Colony Pioneers. And that's who comes up next. And as I said, talking to Brian Randle after the game, there are a lot of things these Randle Lions are going to have to do better these next 2 weeks if they have another shot at 16-0.
It's hard to throw. We turned the ball over 3 times early. The best part about it is that we had adversity. We had it early, and we overcame. So calls like the personal foul on Pac-Man, if he doesn't hit the kid, then it's a 12-yard completion for a first down. You're supposed to teach him not to leave with the helmet. He led with his shoulder. He separated the boy from the ball. It was clean, but you have to deal with human error. And they're a green bunch, and it's one of those things. You just gotta overcome.
And if I'm burying the lead on the Lions' win over Travis here, forgive me. I felt it was important to talk about what was a little different with the Lions in the eye test in the game against the Tigers. I think that's very important to frame what the next couple of weeks have to look like for Randle to win another district championship. But the story of Friday night at Traylor Stadium was the story of the best running back in America. Now, depending on what recruiting service you put the most stock in, which rankings you care the most about, the spot may look different. But make no bones about it. Landon Williams-Callis is a 5-star talent and is the best running back in the country in the class of 2027. There's nobody better wearing a helmet and pads and playing that position right now than the junior wearing number 1 for the Randle Lions. It's his first time with more than 20 carries in a game this season. He runs for a school record 326 yards and a school record 6 touchdowns. He had more than 70 yards above his previous career high and surpassed the previous career high of 5 touchdowns that he recorded against Elgin in the area round at Merrill Green Stadium in Bryant. Williams-Callis did it all for the Lions on Friday night. It was getting a step into space and outracing the defense for 40-yard, 50-yard touchdowns. He was finishing through contact, pushing the pile. He does everything that you need a running back to do. He's not the biggest. He's not a Derrick Henry running back, right, or a Latavius Murray style, just big bruising back. He's a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit more toward the Darren Sproles mold. But elite speed, elite instincts. I've talked to Brian Randle 200 times about Landon Williams-Callis the last few years. And I think my favorite description that Coach Randle gives about his star junior is that this is not Landon's first time on earth. He says Landon, in a previous life, learned how to play football. Landon spent his previous life learning technique and what to recognize and all of that. Now, this time around, he's perfecting it. They didn't have to teach him anything. He knows how to play the position at a level that nobody his age should be able to do. He's already got more than 4,000 rushing yards in his career. He's just got 2 completed seasons plus 3 games on top of that. Is over 4,000 yards for his career. He is on pace to set, nay, shatter history books in the state of Texas for his exploits on the field. I asked Coach Randle what more he can say about his star junior, and he shared some thoughts after the greatest night for the position in this now 4-year history of the Lions program.
He makes us all good coaches. You know what I mean? Like, you call inside zone, he's going to pop it. You call wide zone, he's going to score. Then once they start cheating up, well, then we could hit them. We could hit them deep. Well, the problem was we couldn't get open because we weren't winning the one-on-one battles. Yeah. We just weren't winning. Like, our receivers weren't getting open. But again, they have 3 defensive backs that are all going to Power 4 schools, and then the one kid going to Oklahoma State, that linebacker. And man, they got a squad, man. He's got a chance. He's got a chance, and they're salty enough to give Rich Point all they want.
Of course, we talked about this earlier here in the podcast. Randle goes to Hall Stadium in Missouri City next week, actually really on Thursday night, where they will take on Fort Bend Marshall. The Buffs had to rally to beat Crosby this week. They're 2-0 after their game last week against Dallas Skyline was rained out. That's a game Randle won a season ago, 45-7 at Traylor Stadium in a big statement win to start that district season. I'm sure the Lions will be looking to do the same this week. Other scores on Friday. Iowa Colony, a big 59-14 win over A-Leaf Elsick, while Lake Creek squeaks by Strake Jesuit 30-28. Katy picks up a big win. The Tigers beating Morton Ranch 57-0. While Cinco Ranch defeats Seven Lakes 42-3. Down by the water, Baytown Sterling knocks off Baytown Lee 48-7, while Fort Bend Marshall rallies late for a 17-14 win over Crosby. Port Arthur Memorial 56, Fort Bend Hightower 27, and Texas City 21-14 win over a squad that made the drive up from Mexico City. A cool win for the Stingerees. Other action Friday night, Bay City 28, Columbia 20, Sealy 58, Brazosport 0. Belleville with a big win, 36-16 over a very talented Fort Bend Crawford team, while Navasota thrashes Brookshire Royal 56-7. Brazos beats St. John's XXII 58-0, with Stafford knocking off Sweeney 49-17. Tomball Christian 21, Bowling 14 in that one. Ganado, a high-scoring win over East Bernard 56-45, and Sacred Heart beat Louise 33-8.
In need of professional care with a personal touch? Physical therapy care and aquatic rehab of Fort Bend can get you back to work, life, and play free from pain. With locations in Richmond and the Fulshear Katy area, Physical Therapy Care and Aquatic Rehab of Fort Bend offers orthopedics, sports medicine, vertigo and balance rehab, and post-surgical rehab, and more. Call today at 281-344-8900 and find out.
And Saturday, I made the drive to Turner Stadium in Humble to take on George Ranch against the Humble Wildcats. And man, I don't know if it was the Horns maybe looking ahead to next week's 10-year anniversary celebration of its state championship in 2015. I don't know if it was the 0-2 record on the Wildcats on paper coming into that one. I don't know if it was the heat and how hot it was with a noon kickoff on Saturday. But, man, you want to talk about a nightmare start. That was a nightmare start for the Longhorns in a 28-14 loss, their second loss in a row. And you see 28-14 and you think, okay, 2-score game, couple plays here, couple plays there. Maybe we're talking about something different. But realistically, this was a 28-0 game at halftime. It was a 28-0 game at halftime. And George Ranch only had 2 first downs across the first 2 quarters of football. And it was on their last drive of the first half. Humble had more touchdowns, 4, than George Ranch had first downs, 2, in that first half. Coming off of a loss to Clear Falls and a really strong win over Houston Westside, this is a George Ranch offense that was averaging in the 40s points per game-wise, something like that. And I know this was disappointing. And talking to head coach Casey Vaught after the game, I mean, look, he didn't make any excuses. His team just has to play better. And I think you can hear it's kind of two-sided, right? On one hand, you're disappointed in the loss and you would like to see the team play better, especially offensively. I thought the defense played really well in the second half. But the other side of that coin is I think you can tell how disappointed and frustrated Casey Vaught is in that outcome. And I think for the Longhorns head coach, I mean, to hear that from him is a good sign. They expect more. They expect this team to look better than they did today. And they have an opportunity next week against Bryan. But as Coach Vaught says here, once you get them on the field, you got guys that just have to start making plays.
Half. I don't think we had a first down in the first half, and you do that, you're in trouble.
I was going to say, too, right, like that's the thing. You go up against an 0-2 team on paper, and you look at that, but there's the element of them being maybe a little bit hungrier to get their first win as well, right?
Well, they've played 2 good teams
I was talking with Rob Tate of Sportscast Media, formerly of the Houston Chronicle, and he was the Montgomery County sports editor for the Chronicle for a while, about this game. He asked me a couple times, like, are you surprised by this result? And yes, I was. I expected George Ranch to be much more competitive in this contest than they were throughout. But on the same side of that, I mean, it's an 0-2 Humble team coming in that they're playing on homecoming. They're motivated to get their first win of the season. They've got athletes on the team. So it's always a challenge when you are playing in a game that you expect to win against a team that knows you probably expect to win, I think it can be a challenge to overcome that on the road when you've got enough variables. And I mean, you take away a 79-yard or 72-yard touchdown run for Hayden Drinkard there in the fourth quarter. His numbers weren't particularly robust. I thought the Wildcats did a really good job of plugging the lanes and taking away a lot of what George Ranch wanted to do. And I did ask Coach Vaught about the offense, and I talked to him about particularly quarterback Tony Morrison, who I thought after that slow start found some things downfield when he extended those plays in the backfield. Running to the sideline, he particularly liked running to his right and throwing back toward that sideline. And I asked Coach Vaught about those opportunities that presented themselves, like a 28-yard touchdown pass to Trevor Bielitz there at the end that gave that final margin in the game's final minute.
It wasn't an easy Saturday night with the Foster Falcons as they struggled mightily on offense, defense, and special teams on Saturday night against the Angleton Wildcats at Traylor Stadium. But that is the way the season has gone for the 6A program that now dropped to 0-3 this season. Now, they were in the same predicament last year, but they didn't win a game in preseason play last year, but then turned it around once District 26A play started, and they made the playoffs. So maybe there is something to the madness going on over at the Nest with Shane Hanks and company. From the start, the Falcons looked lost or bewildered, especially on special teams, when receiving a kickoff after Angleton scored on the first drive of the contest. Needing someone to take charge back there when receiving a kickoff is paramount, especially when two players are going at the ball at the same time. Who's going to catch it? Who's going to handle it? And who should be in charge? There has to be a lot of youth on that kickoff team because there was confusion throughout the game. Offensively, having a two-quarterback system is tough because there is no stability with the offensive line, running backs, or wideouts. But in order to figure that position out, coaches have to see who performs better. In the game against Angleton, it was rough for both signal callers. There's athletes on the field for Foster. There's no doubt about it. But somewhere, something is just not clicking. Of course, this is probably the same thing that everyone was saying last year after a 3